Guru Nation, welcome back. I can't believe it's been 4 years. Elizabeth Weeks wrote, I thought when I messaged you, I can't remember what inspired me to message you. I think I saw something, a post or a comment, and I thought, okay, like we're probably due for another podcast. But I thought, when I messaged you, I thought maybe it's too soon because we just did one like so recently, and it turns out it's 4 years ago. So there goes my like reservations. We're living in a warp time on LinkedIn. Like we're all connected, and it skews our perception of time. But I we haven't done this for 4 years.
I every time I speak with you, I enjoy it. And I honestly didn't even realize it had been 4 years until I was thinking back. We do speak frequently on LinkedIn through posts. The impetus for this was you made such an insightful comment about decentralized clinical trials. And like I joked with you, I don't speak because I don't have the expertise. I have a little bit of knowledge, but I love the back and forth because you guys are, the site owners and right there. And I've been to so many sites and I've been to your site, which was great. And what sparked that was I thought what you wrote was very insightful and I noted it. And then that was the exchange. But yeah, I feel like we talk so much more that it seems
Wow,
like it's on the
yeah.
podcast, but it's not.
I forgot you even stopped by my site back in Costa Mesa. Wow. That must have been like 8 years ago now.
Long story short, I wrote self-published that book. I sent it to you because I sent it to all the influencers that I had noted, and you were nice enough to read it. And then
Yeah.
on the other side of that coin, around the same time, I think I went to your site first, just total random for the organization I was previously working for. And I saw you and I saw you on the couch filming. And then it clicked in my head, that's the guy. And then that's what inspired me when a couple years later, when I wrote my book, to send you a copy. So it's like
Ah, yes.
serendipity three times, four
Wow.
times over.
I yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. I was about to say we've never met in person, but that's not true. It was just so long ago. We got to do it again. I hope you'll be at Save Our Sites conference.
I would love to go. I
Let's
think
do it.
it's
Let's do
long
it.
overdue and I look forward to it, especially because you're having it in the West, which
Hmm.
it's rarely happens in the West. So
Tucson, and we're gonna do some stuff in California in the future conferences. California is just so expensive, and it made more sense to do Arizona for the first year. And I think Brad and Dr. Fox have their cities in line for the next two, Oklahoma and Illinois. But after that, maybe we'll bring it back to California, back to the roots where it needs to be. It's just, geez, it's so expensive to do anything in California, especially like San Diego or Orange County. Um, but thank you for coming on. Yeah, we can get into a lot of stuff, the conference, DCT, but I wanted to get into your career because again, it's been 4 years since we've talked, and you're someone who's done just about everything in this space. You've outside of owning a site, you've worked at all the big CROs just about. You've been clinical ops manager, CRA, site engagement liaison. Um, now you're gone on to do independent work as of May. So as of just like 2 months ago, right?
exactly. This is my not that I'm counting, this is my seventh week, and next
Seven.
week is my eighth week. So almost 2 months. And I can't believe it's been that. I mean, that's such a short time, but relatively speaking, I can't believe it's been 2 months.
What
So
is your, this is the first time you've gone solo, like on your own?
this
No safety
23
net?
years, no safety net, 23 years, um, 23 years working for CROs. Well, the study coordinator was my first job, but then working for various CROs, great experiences, especially my last organization I worked for. I worked for PPD, greatest company in the world. I
Wow.
will honestly say
Compared to
greatest
the other CROs
experiences.
you've worked at, they're the best.
I mean,
It's a moment
Personally,
in
for
time.
me,
They change, right? They change
yeah,
with
yeah,
mergers and all
yeah.
that.
I will say that every company that I've worked for has been wonderful, but I worked for PPD the longest, and it was the most wonderful experience I've ever had.
Wow.
Just for various reasons. And so, bittersweet. But they're a great organization. And I went out on my own. I thought it had been brewing around in my head for a while to do it because I like to do different things. I mean, like you said, I've worked in various different positions, and I've gained a lot of expertise in site identification and evaluation. Um,
I think that's when you
knowing the
came to my
models.
site in Costa Mesa for like a
Yeah,
site selection visit or
it
something.
was. And that was
Yeah.
really cool. Your staff were great. You had a great setup. I can't remember the study, but that
I
was a great
me either.
experience.
Rest in
You
peace,
guys,
global clinical trials. We had like a window, but like see, this is a whole nother podcast. Owning a site, especially a startup, very difficult. I don't recommend it for most people.
yeah, it's not, I can honestly say that it's not a venture I will ever, try to go into. I don't think I have the nerve. I've got pretty good nerves of steel, but I don't think I have that level of nerves of steel. But,
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I kind of had been thinking about being independent for a while. And just honestly, I wanted the opportunity to just, I've developed different skill sets, and I wanted to just be able to take my career to the next level and branch out and do a little bit more, just do a little bit more. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm doing training, I'm doing content development, clinical operations, support consulting, different
Mm.
things. And it's very interesting. Um, I'm, thank
Mm.
goodness I worked in business development a long time ago because I learned the benefits of marketing yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
But you've been doing that very well. You've been
thank
doing
you.
that extremely well using LinkedIn and even before LinkedIn got big, the book. I mean, I never really, maybe I did get into it, but there's so many topics we can discuss. But why? I think they're all related too. What made you, when was the book? Like 10 years ago?
The book was 2000, it was 8 years ago. It was 2015.
2015. What made you want to write this book? Like it takes a special kind of person to want to do that. That's not a easy thing to do.
And because you are an author several times over. I mean, several times. I think I looked on Amazon one day and haven't you written like a bunch of books? And I'm not trying to embarrass
One
you, but I'm
real
just saying,
one,
like,
one real one. I
well,
wrote a
that's,
bunch of like Kindle singles, which now are no longer, I took them all off once I wrote the comprehensive guide, but I'm in the process of writing another book right now.
oh, wonderful. I think what the inspiration for me to write that book was I've always been a writer. I've always enjoyed creative writing, and I've been able to kind of intersect scientific and creative in my writing. Um, I wanted to study coordinators, in my opinion, hardest workers in clinical research.
Hmm.
Under recognized, not as much as now. I think they're getting more recognition, more, but under recognized, I don't think as appreciated as they should be. I worked as a coordinator for 9 or 10 months. I got a taste of it. I learned a ton. And I don't know, as I progressed in my career, I thought, what what is a great book topic? How a nurse fell into research and became a coordinator. And it wasn't, people say, oh, the book's based on you. I'm like, no, it's not. There's a little bit of me, but there's really the great coordinators with whom I've worked when I was a new CRA, the coordinators who trained me. Because trust me when I tell you, when I was a new CRA back in 2000, 2001, awesome coordinators solidified and helped train me as I went along because I was the newbie CRA. I knew things, but I was learning and growing, and I had great study coordinators say, that's not really, blah, blah, blah. And I listened because I'm humble, and people who know
Mhm.
more than me, please tell me what I need to know. And I became better at my job because of study coordinators. So it just seemed a logical topic. Who are the unsung heroes? Not me, because I only did it briefly. The coordinators who've been doing it, who help. the patients, who help make the studies go. And it's just an interesting, funny book about a study nurse who becomes a nurse who walks in to a clinic, applies for a job, and walks out a coordinator, and just what happened, her training, her adventures. There are some characters based on real people. I mean, they would never know, and everything is positive. But yeah, I self-published it on Amazon, and my joke is it's sold about 50 copies.
It's
You know,
tough to do. It's very tough. We'll put the link underneath this video. It's
thank
still on
you.
there, right? It's gotta still
It
be on
is.
there. Yeah, we'll put
It
the
is.
link
And
underneath this video. So and if you're listening in the show notes, go buy it. It's amazing. It's the origin story, more or less, combined with the educational info, nuggets, career stuff. And we're going to talk about a lot of that a lot of those themes in this podcast too, hopefully. But I always try to figure out like what makes, because it's related, like the reason you wrote that book, I think on some level is related to the same decision making that it would take for you to leave a stable job after like 20 some odd years and go on your own.
you know, my greatest loves are training and education and creating content. And there are more opportunities to do this independently and understandably, because when you work for an organization, you are make an agreement to follow with the confines of your role, or externally if they need you to, because that's who your loyalty is to. And that makes total sense. And I did that wonderfully and happily, and had wonderful experiences. But I just felt, I've done book updates in my career, and I've been able to write articles like you, and do creative things. And I just felt in my heart, I wanted to see if I could successfully focus more on creating content, training, other aspects. I'm not limiting myself. If I need to, and if there's an opportunity to do contract CRA work, absolutely would I do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm able to do a lot of little different things and some big things. And that's what I like.
Do you think
And really, go ahead. Sorry.
this is where it gets interesting for the viewers and the listeners because a lot of them see themselves in you maybe and want to do this. I know I get, and you probably get also tons of CRAs asking me, "Hey, how do I go out on my own? It's nice to do what I'm doing, but I feel like there's more I can be doing." And on your LinkedIn, independent clinical research consultant, says content creation, book updates, marketing blogs, articles, training and development, public speaking, and then ClinOps, which includes site selection, investigational site models, process monitoring activities, CRA. And this is where I see, like, if I'm assuming you work with biotech, smaller sponsors.
Variety,
Hmm.
variety. I mean, it's, I obviously I can't name them, but it's like, um, I'm doing a little bit of a lot of different things. And
Pre-public,
I would be
public, some of them
say that
pre-publicly
again.
trade, some of them pre-publicly traded, some of them publicly traded. But all
Um,
sponsors, right? Or are you contracting also with CROs?
I haven't, I'm not doing any monitoring work right now.
Okay.
And the companies I work with are variety, public, private. And it's not like it's a ton, but it's very unique and different. And I love it. So
But it's perfect because you can use your skill set that you've developed to help these biotechs. So now when a biotech may ask you, hey, Elizabeth, thanks for setting up our processes and all this and helping us identify some sites. We actually need some monitoring help too. You're willing to jump in and do it because it's for yourself, it's for a client, as opposed to just working a job as a CRA for a CRO. My question is, do you think you could have done this sooner? Did you have the skill set to be able to do this earlier, or did you do it at the perfect time?
I think for me, I might have had the skill set a couple years ago. And I mean, literally like 1 or 2 years ago.
Mm,
I think because I guess you could say I'm a control freak. Not that none of
All
us
right.
are. Um, I My husband is a successful entrepreneur, not in our industry, obviously. So I've always felt like it was a nice balance. He has two smaller companies. He's been doing this. He did it in England for successfully for 15 years. He moved here 23 years ago and, did it. And I felt like that was a nice balance in our marriage. Steady income versus
Hmm.
steady but bursts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like as things in my career have progressed and I developed skills and I've kind of been able to build my brand more, I think I just sat there one day and thought, this is the right time because I've been able to put my name out there and get my name out there decently
Yeah.
and build my brand and do different things. And I think as you develop those credentials, you develop the confidence and trust that you need when people are asking for your services, consulting, writing. So I think within the last 2 years it would have been the right time, but before that, I'm not sure. For
Confidence.
me, it all worked out perfectly. I mean, not perfectly, there are hiccups, challenges because it's new and different, but the timing was right for me.
Confidence is something you mentioned that I was going to ask about. So, a common theme, many of these same people that reach out to me, it's not the skills they're lacking, it's the confidence. And that could be confident. Everyone's personal situation is different. Not everyone is in a marriage, not everyone's in a relationship. Everyone's situation's different. But one of the themes, one of the common threads that we can follow is confidence and lack thereof or plenty of. For everyone, it's different. But when was it when you felt, hey, you know what? I actually can do this. And like, do you remember like a specific moment when you felt like, you know what, I can actually do this on my own? Or did it just happen like over time gradually?
think I think I had my moment around the time of the ACRP conference. I don't know if it was one moment. I think it was a time frame that led up to an kind of an epiphany,
Hmm.
and it was just like, I need to try this. The voice in my head, God, whatever you want to say.
This
But
year's
I felt like,
ACRP conference, 2023?
yes, yes.
Wow.
And I'm not saying it had directly to do with ACRP or anything. I mean, I love them and they let me speak at their conferences, but I just think being in that environment, speaking, people you see, questions answered, feelings, confirmations. And I think the last month prior to that, it led up to, and
Hmm.
opportunities. Earlier this year, opportunities were presented. I can't go into specifics, obviously, but opportunities were presented. And I thought, can't really do that because I'm not independent.
Yeah.
And then it was like, hmm, I felt compelled to try because of what was coming and manifesting in my life.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a series of events, serendipity, and then at that conference, it was kind of like solidified things. So
I
hope that
think
answers
if
your question.
it does, it feels like the conference and a lot of people actually, maybe this is one of the things that I like about conferences, even though I don't go to too many, is like they can serve as a catalyst for speeding up a reaction that would have taken longer on its own to play out. Maybe it just like sped it up. Just like in biology, you have enzymes that speed up reactions that would happen anyways, but it just would take very long for it to occur. Maybe that's what ACRP was for you in this case, combined with all the other stuff that led up to it.
You made a great point. Obviously, you've been on your own since what, 15 years,
Day
20
one.
years?
I
Yeah, I
think
was
it's
going to say, I
18
mean,
now.
have you
Yeah.
ever worked for anyone else?
I had contract roles here and there as a CRA, but not really.
Okay. I was very fortunate because two different things helped me, and I still am learning, had to learn, but I went in with knowledge ahead of time because had in my career when I was a CRA manager in the past, I managed contractors. This is like 2008 or 9. So I learned a lot about, okay, I learned about that side of the 1099 contractor. Then fast forward to my marriage. my husband came here, and then he went off on his own again shortly after he and I got married. And I learned about quarterlies, incorporating, projections, because I was part of, like any good wife, I don't let my husband touch the bills.
Ah.
So it's like, and he knew a lot about that. And I've been very fortunate with my husband, because with that prior knowledge, and then with helping him manage those aspects of his business, I went in already with like the first thing I did when I decided to become two things. I went in, I became a consultant, already having secured a little bit of work, not a lot, but a little, because, you don't know. And then the second thing I did was meet with my CPA
Mhm.
and said, this is what I'm doing. This is what I think I need to do. And then he gave me the list of, well, incorporating this, blah, blah, projections. And so I started out right from the get go with the
Wow.
knowledge, liability insurance, this and that. And so I felt very fortunate that information I had gleaned from my life and professional and personal life helped me. I think and I'm new to this, I'm learning, but what I know previously is that you really have to think. I mean, it's a great idea. Oh, I want to be independent, but then you have to think about a wise CEO said to me recently, you're marketing every day, right? Every day in some way. And then, be open. Don't, don't just say, this is what I'm doing. Expect things to be slow, because they're going to be at times. Um, you know, and then I think some people underestimate how difficult it can be. Another CEO at the ACRP conference joked around with me and said, have you had the 3 a.m. panic attacks yet? I said, actually, I have. And it's not really panic attacks, and I'd never make light of that. But I mean, you wake up at 3 in the morning and your brain's like, and you start making lists, and I email
Oh yeah.
myself, and that's what makes you, that's what helps you plan and become successful. But
Even
there's a
when times are
downside.
good, even when times are good as a solopreneur, you're gonna have that. Like,
Yeah.
and then when times are bad, forget about it. We can get into stories I had about just making payroll over a decade ago. I mean, waking up 3 in the morning because that's when the bank clears new income, like new revenue. So waking up, refreshing 301, 303, 330, did that payment come in? Or am I gonna have to pay my staff for my savings? Like, that's some real stuff that people don't talk about.
Yeah, I just think that I'm not discouraging anyone. I think if you have the gumption and the skills, go for it. But
Mm-hmm.
I think you really need to do research. And this is just I mean, I'm not you're one level, next level with your businesses and everything. I'm an independent consultant. It's me. So, but you still have to do research. I mean, I Googled, what do I need to set up my small business? I asked my husband, he's probably like, okay, I need to leave now because I'm asking him all these questions. I'm very lucky with him. Asking friends, colleagues, um, this, that, trying not to bombard one person with 18 questions, because people are busy, they're running their businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very fortunate that I've had a lot of nice help from colleagues with just little, ask this question here, ask this question there. I do get asked a lot of questions, and I wish I could help people, but you can help a little bit, but then you can't have your full-time job being helping other people with their businesses. You have to
Yeah,
balance it.
that would be a full time. And your posts, I mean, you just had one on delegation of authorities log. You're a lot of engagement on those things. You're definitely helping a lot of people just through your post. When you went solo, May 2023, did you already have a client lined up, or did you go solo and then you had to go look for a client?
I had um I had stuff in the works before I went solo. That's what I'll
Okay.
say. Yeah,
Okay.
I
Nice.
would not have gone solo had I not had stuff in the works.
How many people, Elizabeth, just like real talk, okay? Let's say 10-year senior CRA, 10 years of being a senior CRA, just a hypothetical person. This is like the typical CRA that reaches out to me and asks me for advice on going solo. Usually they're like 10 years, senior CRA, they work their way up, comfortable job, everything's paid for, healthcare, everything. Kids are grown up now. They've got a little nest egg. How many of those people are out there, do you think, percentage wise, that you think would actually do very well if they went solo, but they're just afraid? Like percentage wise, do you think it's half, less than half?
Just spitballing, I would guess 25-30%.
That would actually
Um,
succeed?
yes, I do, because I think that if you, okay, let me preface this by saying, as contract CRAs, I
As
can't speak
contract
to other,
CRA. So only
yes.
30, let's go with 30. Only 30% would even be successful as just contract CRAs.
Well, let me give context to what I'm saying. I think, okay, that's probably not fair. Let's say 40 to 50%.
It's
And
still low. Wow.
I'm not, well, no, that makes me sound negative, and
No,
I'm
no,
not
but
trying
go
to
with
be
it.
at
Go with
all.
it. Yeah, go with it. Because
I
I'm
think
I'm caught off guard.
I think, let's say half. And
Okay.
I'll say, because I think, unfortunately, there's the old adage that overnight success takes 10, 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that people underestimate the difficulty and the stress and the worry. I think sometimes people think it's going to be as, and being a CRA is like super hard. Trust me, I know. But when you work for an organization, it's a challenging job, but you are, when you're, and I'm talking about 1099 contractors, not W-2 contractors. When
Mhm.
you are, um, sorry, my computer's being funny. When you are thinking about becoming a contract CRA 1099, I think people underestimate finding work, being your own resourcing person, health benefits. And I think that some people might pull the trigger, and then after a month or two, what am I doing? Because it's scary, right? And then I think, and give up maybe. And then I think, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, I think people think that becoming independent is, and it's wonderful, trust me, there are positives, there are negatives, just like working for an organization. But I think sometimes people underestimate.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying I'm an expert at all. I am not. But I went in knowing the risks because I had someone who's been doing it for 14 years and I've done it with them. And I'm not even saying I'm successful. So far, things are going pretty well. But I also had to lay a lot of passive work by doing extra stuff, evenings, weekends, to be able to say, hey, this might work out.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'm
I don't
with
think
you
it has
then
to
on
do
the
with skills.
50%. I think I'm with you then on the 50%. It makes sense that I think 100% of them believe, hey, I know how to be a CRA. I should just do this on my own and make more. But I think half of them don't have a plan for the business side. Like, how are you going to actually get the contracts? Do people magically know you exist? And if so, do they trust you? And if so, like, how are you going to make sure you keep finding new ones? Because you got to talk to like 10 clients before you get one or two seriously interested, and that doesn't happen overnight. That takes time.
And I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you, because you know there's so many awesome CRAs, and even the CRAs of the 50% who wouldn't succeed would isn't aren't because they don't have the skills, right? They could be
Hmm.
brilliant. I
Hmm.
mean, there are so many good CRAs that they're plenty better than me. But you have to have, who said success is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration? I can't remember who
I
said
think it was
that.
Thomas Edison.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. And I think that you have to have, I mean, no one's going to, I don't think anybody could start being an independent consultant or contract, or sorry, an independent contractor or consultant already having work lined up if they're already working full. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
possible. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mean not having some work, but I mean, there's a bridge of time between leaving full-time employment and starting a
Yeah.
full-time contract. But I think that's underestimated. And then the business side, like you said, that's not realized. It's just like, I'm going to pull the trigger and do it. And then it's like, oh, I didn't
Yeah.
realize this. I didn't realize this. And I still didn't realize everything. I mean, like, you know, health insurance. I mean, you
Super
know,
expensive.
ton of, yes. And, people think, I went through um, a consultant to help navigate me through the marketplace because I did not feel like I had enough knowledge to know what was the right choice for my family. So
For the
that's one
healthcare.
thing, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 That's
Me
one
too.
thing.
Me too.
Yeah. And
I
then the
still
other
don't know.
thing, hey, and you have to know about it for our state, cover California versus not, and
Yep.
blah blah blah. And so you just, I mean, and so you just have to think about the time for administrative stuff. So I had to set up time before, working in business development, setting up calls, doing the administrative stuff. So
There's
it's
so many people that you bring up a really good set of points that I think people need to discuss. Like it's nice to want to go out on your own, whether it's start a site or do what Elizabeth is doing, consulting. People think, okay, well, my skill set is there. Like I know how to do a site. There are so many good site directors out there. Like I'm not even a very good one, but I
I
could
doubt
almost
that.
I'm decent. I can get the job done, but there's like on LinkedIn, based on the comments I get, like I already know these guys and gals, they know their stuff. Like they can run a site. I don't think the majority of them could run the business though. That's the difference. And I think people get stuck in mastering the actual work that they ignore everything else and then they get blindsided by the market. Like, how are you going to get studies? I mean, how are you going to get new stuff? Let's start even before that. How are you going to get a PI? Like, you have to convince a physician to want to work with you. A lot of these site directors that have grown up at sites where they're just managing people, they already have the physicians working there. Like they're just managing. So they've developed these personalities where they don't need to be influential or persuasive. They just need to like get the job done. They need to be managers. Well, that's actually the opposite personality you need to go out in the community and convince a physician who's already busy to want to work research with you. So I think we have to separate the skill. Do you think all this is to ask, do you think um there's a diminishing return on developing the same skill set over and over, like monitoring? I mean, you can only get so good at monitoring. Like you'll never end because there's new therapeutic indications, but
Right.
like the fundamentals are basically the same. Do you think
They
there's a
are.
diminishing returns versus like if this person really does want to consider going on their own at some point, start learning how to brand themselves, biz dev, that will be greater ROI for their career if that is what they want to do than just continuing to gain more experience as a CRA.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And like I said, the one of the hardest jobs I ever did, and I don't think I was particularly good at the close. I can sell, but I'm not a good salesperson in the close. I don't know if that makes sense. I am with myself because I'll know my product, but I think business development was an awesome experience for me because it helped me about realize the importance of marketing. Like I said, some people thought I was good. I think some people didn't. It doesn't matter. The point is that I, I love to write. I've been good fortune to be published, and I love to speak, and people, will let me speak. But I had to start with my core skill set as a CRA and then build and grow off of that. And now all these things are coming together, and it's like I'm so glad that I'm nosy. I'm so glad that I need a life and didn't have a life and did clinical research on the weekend because I didn't even realize that I was paving the path to this time. And I was
Mm-hmm.
learning and growing, and I was so grateful for the experiences, but I was also developing the tools I would need to go off on my own. So
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is very true. If you limit yourself, what do you say? Generalists
A
flourish?
generalist, I've been preaching that
Yeah.
forever. Like I think that is, again, it's just me. I think there's more ROI in obtaining a broad set of skills after you've mastered one thing. I think mastery is important. Master one thing, move on to the next. You're not going to have time to master that next thing like you did the first one, most likely, but get some experience in it. So maybe biz dev and some marketing. Then I think ultimately, and also the stakeholders, try to get exposure to all the different stakeholders, the sites, the CRO, the sponsor, and the tech vendors, which are an increasingly important part of this ecosystem now. They take more than half of the budgets for any study from sponsors, is tech
I
vendors.
believe that. Absolutely, I
Shout out
believe
to
that.
Nato, Versatile, Viva, and Creo. All sponsors and all tech vendors, site-centric ones at that.
I think that, and you made such an interesting point. Monitoring, I mean, there have been so many things. I mean, we talked about this 4 years ago. Like, we were both in clinical research when EDC was around, but not, that's it, right? I mean, I know some studies still use paper CRF here and there. They do,
In
but
Europe, yeah. In Europe.
yeah, but and some, I think maybe some in the States, I can't say who, what, or when, but the I think when we started, EDC wasn't a novelty, but it was like, that's never going to play out, naysayers. And then here we are. We talked about, risk-based monitoring. People were like, it'll never flourish. It'll never go because, it's change and it's dramatic. And we're used to
Yeah.
100% SDB CRF review. And now we're on,
DCT.
ICH E6 R3 is coming up, and I'm not saying that's all risk-based monitoring, but it's the exception, not the norm. So I think back when tech was becoming more and more part of the integral landscape of clinical trials, there were us skeptics, but now if you're not computer savvy as a CRA, you're going to be lost.
Oh, I mean,
So
yeah, that's goes without being said. I remember in '05 when I started, the first two studies I was on as a CRC were paper CRFs. And I remember the sponsors were switching to EDC. And I mean, I just started, so I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Instead of writing on this paper, let's just put it in this database. That's better. I had monitors telling me, "Oh, I'm so glad I'm retiring after this study, Dan. These EDC is going to take all of our jobs. I'm done. I'm glad I don't have to worry about this." And they're not done. CRAs are more in demand than they've ever been with EDC,
absolutely.
but that was the mentality back then from the old school thinking. And who knows, maybe I'm old school now and thinking that this whole DCT thing is not going to work out the way the industry expects. I think elements of it are already here. It's going to stay, but there's other elements where I'm thinking this. I don't think this is actually going to work because the different now is you need sites to change their practices. It boils down to like the way we're actually seeing patients, and to me, that's very different than just switching from paper to EDC. It's just it's the same process, it's just a different platform. But now we're talking about changing the process and the platform to seeing patients remotely, and the telehealth I can see, but like delegating to clinicians that are not trained on the study, I don't know if that's gonna work out. Just like virtual trials never took off. Remember 2019? Virtual trials was like all the rage. Well, what happened? You don't hear that anymore.
Think that I enjoy, like I said earlier, I love reading the updates by you and Brad and other influencers because I feel like I learned a ton. I haven't read, I'm going to start reading the guidance, FDA guidance on DCTs,
Hmm.
because I honestly haven't, I've been meaning to read it. I've looked at it high level, but I'm really going to get my teeth into it this week. And I have a little bit of experience with decentralized trials components. And I think, like you said, I can't speak on it. I'm not an expert, but I definitely see the benefits of like patient convenience, certain aspects, hybrid on, site hybrid, whatever. But I do agree with your point that, well, patients love coming to sites. I've been to a lot of sites in my career. I mean, sometimes if you have an elderly patient, for example, that's they live for the study visit because that's their people taking care of them. That's their contact with humanity. That's their
Right,
compassion, right?
right.
And then I see just the benefits. I mean, sites are lifeblood.
Well, the argument to
So
that from the industry, and when I say the industry, I mean the DCT and their investors. So the DCT tech companies and their investors would argue, well, Elizabeth, we hear you. And for those patients that want to come to the site, let them come. This is just for those that don't want to. But I don't think that's going to work. That's the problem. I think that's wishful thinking. I think problems are going to occur. Like in this guidance, it specifically stated the healthcare provider that the PI selects can see patients from a remote location on behalf of the site, but they don't need to be trained on the protocol because they're just doing standard of care things. But in research studies, a lot of that is gray area because in standard of care, they're not trained to document times as stringently as we are in research. They don't have to do triplicate ECGs 5 minutes apart. Like they don't have to worry about what time you drew the blood. In research, these are very important things. These are deviations if you don't do it. So you kind of have to train them if you want it done right. But then the guidance is saying, no need to train. Just get it done. Well, who's going to be responsible for cleaning up the mess when a CRA like you comes through and says, hey, this is deviation and this one is as well, and this one is as well. And you as a CRC say, well, the guidance said we can do this. And then you say, well, that's just guidance. But the protocol says you got to do this. So this is where I push back. And a lot of this is like inspired by financial backers of these companies. Like they want this to work, but at the expense of whom? Of sites that actually have to deal with the consequences. That's been myself and Brad and Dr. Fox's main pushback with all of this is, hey, like let's address our concerns here.
what I think is neat is, and like I said, I can't, I see benefits of elements of DCTs. I'm not an expert, so I can't speak to. That's why I leave it to the experts. You guys, I just read the
I'm not an
comments.
expert. I'm just a
But
site
I
owner and I'm thinking like, how is this gonna work? And do I want to go that far? Raymond from Creo said Creo's like yoga, like there's different levels of stretching. So okay, DCT could be like yoga too. There's different elements of that. Telehealth I'm okay with. E-consent I'm okay with. Having a stranger do study assessments I'm not okay with.
just think, like I said, like you made a great point about the importance of training. I'm not speaking to what the guidance says versus not. I can't speak to that, but I will say training is critically important in clinical research and procedure conduct. That's all I'll say about that. But I wanted to ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Um, what was the impetus for Save Our Sites? Because
Mm.
I think that is so clever. Obviously, the SOS Save Our Sites. You've been stirring up some awesome publicity, positivity, interest,
Yeah.
like a reignition almost, if you will. And do you mind if I ask you? Because I just see these posts and I think this is so awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you. And we're working on other things too, like on the sponsor side. But yeah, save our sites. The sites need a voice. The sites are rarely unheard, even though the people coming up with these guidances say they take all stakeholders suggestions. For the most part, the people that are supposed to be watching out for sites have not been because they get funding from the tech vendors, they get funding from the sponsors, And interestingly enough, the sites and the sponsors have way more in common than any other stakeholders in this industry. Like, and so, okay, then you could say, okay, well, we do get some feedback from sites. It's very valuable feedback. Well, it turns out it's usually venture capital or private equity backed sites that are huge site networks that have much more in common with CROs and tech vendors than they do UMA clinical trials or Hightower clinical research. And we're here to be a voice for the long tail of the sites, the traditionally unheard from, and either because these sites don't want to go to some of these bigger conferences, or because they think it's not for them, or they can't afford to, or they can't afford to send all their coordinators, so they just send a biz dev person, and the biz dev person could care less about site processes. They care about getting more studies. So they got to schmooze with the CROs and sponsors to do their job of getting more studies. So why are they going to push back on operations when they're there to get studies? Like why why do that? Like that's extracurricular. You don't need it. You're not, that's not what you're there for. You're there to go get us studies, be the face of our site. These are the only kind of sites going to these conferences. You go to more conferences than me. I think you see this as well.
I go to 1 to 2 conferences a year.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, just because before it was just time,
Yeah.
and unless you're speaking, there is cost. Um, and it's a great investment, but I just have to, especially with starting a new business, it's like I have to taper and pace. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I try to go to 1 to 2. Awesome benefits. I mean, there aren't a lot of there are a lot of sites at conferences, but I don't know of another, except for, SCRS, another site dedicated conference. And it's
Yeah.
exciting.
I think so too. And it goes back to the old adage of if you don't like the game, if you don't like the way the game's being played, try to change it. And that's what we're trying to do. I think there's enough of us small sites now with all these platforms. LinkedIn's taking off, Twitter, Facebook, if sites still use that, Instagram, like all these platforms are amplifying the voice. So collectively, like individually, we're not very loud, but collectively, I think we can make a real impact on changes that we would like to see. And simple things like let's try to get paid on time, or uh, what can we do about these inclusion exclusion criteria when they're like unrealistic? Like, can we maybe reconsider how we're designing some trials? I understand that in many cases that's unavoidable, but in some cases it is avoidable. And you just make some small changes, you can include more patients. What about getting more community clinicians doing research, like expanding access? All this talk about getting more diversity in this industry from a patient, from a career perspective, but no one's really doing that. Like, how do we do that? How do we empower an entrepreneur like the next Elizabeth, the next Brad, to go out in their community and start a site when we have all this ambiguity around what we're allowed to do, and now all this DCT stuff is just making it more complicated. So just bringing it back to the fundamentals and having a voice and having a place where sites can say what they want to say, meet with the sponsors who can actually do something about it, and then the smart tech vendors like Inato, Versatrial, the site-centric ones that are there to listen and see if they can make tiny changes, and over time these small changes add up. And that's what we're doing. That's the last thing we wanted to do is have another business to run, or we're not even concerned, Elizabeth, about making money. Like we don't want to lose money. And we already haven't. We already broke even on it. Like with the tickets sold already, we still have until December. We have until the end of this year to sell more tickets and sponsorships. But even before like any sponsors, we have 250 tickets sold. That's enough to pay for the venue and the food and alcohol and have a nice event. It's only one day, so it was like lower budget. But we're not concerned with monetizing this right away. Over time, we want this to be lucrative and profitable so we can actually make changes on a larger scale. But we're not concerned with that initially. We're actually are concerned. We're all site owners and we're concerned about the difference between it's like a tale of two industries. Those who talk about this crazy stuff, which may or may not ever happen, versus those doing the work right now and are laughing about these ideas. So that's a mini rant slash story of why we're doing this.
I think it's great. I look forward to it. Do you see it maybe going to 2 days? If
Yeah,
you've already sold 250 tickets,
not the first event. The first event we only got 1 day, but we have an unofficial like next day. So the main event's Friday. We have a bunch of unofficial things on Saturday, like at local bars and restaurants, which are, by the way, free. By the way, guys, like you're only paying for the 1 day, but you're gonna probably get 1 day and a half out of it. Um, that's why we're getting sponsors. So yeah, we're trying to extend it as much as possible. And then the next year, if this is successful, the next year, I believe it's going to be in Oklahoma City with Brad. We'll have 2 days, maybe even 3 days. Who knows? But well, eventually we'll get to where the other conferences are, but we're not going to lose focus of who we're serving.
that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. I remember in the past you telling me that doing a conference was something you would set your mind on in the future, and here you are doing it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and we did in 2019. I think, yeah, it was 2019. We did a meetup. So it wasn't a conference, but it was like the precursor to a conference in Irvine. It was a 1 day meetup. It was free. And I think we had like 70 people show up from, and there was nothing. You just had to pay for your own way to get there. We even had caterers. We had one sponsor, Creo. Creo paid for the tacos that were there. We had a taco truck. We had 70 people show up. And some people came from North Dakota, Utah. It wasn't just local SoCal people. And that's when I thought, okay, this could actually work like on a national scale.
Remember that you were nice enough to, I wanted to go, but I couldn't because I had a work conflict.
I remember, I
I could,
remember.
I wish I could have gone because that was when in 2019 was that? Do you remember?
I want to say October
And who
2019.
who would have thunk that 6 months later we would be
In a
grounded?
pandemic.
I know.
In the middle of a pandemic, but yeah. Um, but that scare just kind of affected the industry for just like a few months. And then we realized, oh crap, like we're gonna be busier than we've ever been with all this stuff going on. And then we
Exactly.
realized the lockdowns are easing off, and okay, it's just kind of business as usual again. Um, and here we are now talking DCT, and a lot of that stuff was catalyzed by, and the elements of DCT are great, like I said.
Yeah.
I just think it gets jumbled in with all this other noise, which I don't think I don't think even has proof of concept, but there's so much money behind it. I feel like there's people trying to force this to happen, and I just don't think it's going to happen. Just like virtual trials. Remember that? Virtual trials, they were trying to force it to happen and never did.
I never worked in virtual trials. I can't speak
Yeah,
to
because
that.
you actually had a real job where they weren't concerned with that stuff. Like they were trying to do one PI per state, and in the bigger states, they would have one PI per region. So you would have an investigator, let's say in LA. LA County is pretty big, so they would probably have 3 investigators, and then they would have referring sites that would refer patients to those sites. But a lot of the stuff would be done virtually, and it just never worked out. Why? Because no one's referring patients like that, and because the doctors want to do the research themselves if they're going to refer their patients. So never worked. DCT has a better chance of working, but I don't know. It's still tough to convince patients to do a study.
You bring up a really good point. It's interesting, kind of shifting a little bit about getting eliciting excitement and getting new investigators, physicians to be investigators. If
That's what
you're,
SOS
you
is
know,
for. That's what Inato is for. That's what my company DSC is, what Equity and Investments is for. There's companies out there working to make this happen.
yeah, and what I had read or heard from a couple of people was, and I can't quote a source, and I'm not SME in any way, shape, or form, so I want to get that out there. This is just something I read or heard. Something that is not correct, but nevertheless that occurs to physicians who are reluctant to refer patients to, and this is new investigators, but this is also like going into the community and getting more referrals from regular doctors and clinics to clinical research investigators. um, a worry is if the patient is referred for a clinical trial, then they will stop seeing the
Yeah,
provider.
yeah.
And have you heard of that, and what are your
Yeah,
thoughts
I
on
mean,
that?
all of us who work in the industry and at sites know that that is not true. The problem is these physicians who are supposed to do the referring, they don't believe us. And so this is where DCT is trying to fit in. They're saying, well, you don't have to leave your office. You just the patient are never leaves your office and you're actually getting paid for it. And if we can pull this off, that's great. I just think that's a big if because they're trying to pull that off without getting these physicians to be trained investigators. Like that's the whole premise that I have a problem with is okay, well, we have our investigator, they know what we're doing, we have our coordinators, but there's no coordinator at this other site where the patients are being seen, and there's a physician, but they're not an investigator, so they don't really know what it's important to do triplicate EKG. Well, why? Why do we have to do triplicate? We never do triplicate here. We're lucky to do one. Well, that's because the protocol said so. Well, I don't care about the protocol. This is my patient. You're just gonna cause more issues doing this. I think. I think what we need to do is get all these clinicians who are interested in research to consider doing research, and whether that's as sub investigators first, and then PIs, or just sub investigators, and that's it. That's fine, and that's what we're focused on trying to do. And even through my YouTube channel, I'm trying to reach out to clinicians to get them more interested in research.
I came across a um I came across a YouTube video you did um in 2014
Wow.
talking about, yeah, because I was doing research on a topic which I was writing, and I came across a YouTube video you did um about how a new investigator can develop their, for lack of a better word, their street cred and their experience, start
Hmm.
trying to circuit yourself as a sub-I, work as a sub-I.
Yep.
Great experience. And I thought that was such a great point because, you know, active sub-investigators are not the PI, but they're doing almost everything the PI is doing. Not everything, obviously. Signing off the casebooks, no. Ultimate responsibility on 1372, no. But if you have a busy multi-specialty practice and you have, six physicians, and you have a sub-I, one physician who's a sub-I for the other physician who's the PI, and the sub-I is referring patients to ensure continuity of care, the sub-I is going to want to treat their own patients.
Right.
So it's just a great way to, and I loved your point because it was such a great way to work into the investigator role. If you're an active sub investigator, to me, that's the perfect way to position yourself to be a PI. I think it's really hard when, I've been to brand new sites, and this is a topic because I think of importance for me, because I think it's really important to, when you're evaluating a site, to keep an open mind because, oh, you're a new investigator? Oh no, we can't touch you, which is so not fair because,
Right.
one time I went to a new site, and, if because I was an experienced site evaluator, I'm doing pre-study visits, there's a second set of questions that immediately comes to mind. How many years have you been in, say to the PI, how many years have you been in clinical research? First time, as a PI, I don't have experience in clinical research. Okay. Then immediately I think, okay, what are my next set of questions that unfurl in my old school Rolodex in my head? Have you worked as a sub-I? No. Okay. So what training have you or your organization done to prepare you for the PI role? And this site was like, handed me this notebook of all this training that they had ensured this new investigator had done. GCP, human subjects protection, online courses. And it was amazing. And the investigator was more well trained than some experienced PIs
Yeah.
I'd seen. And then it's like, what's your plan for administration? Well, we have a person who's really experienced with contracts and budgets. We have a coordinator who's been in the field for 10 years. And so I was immediately going, okay. And then what was the therapeutic area? XYZ. This guy specializes, he's a clinician and his practice is based on seeing this population. So everything married up perfectly.
Hmm.
So I was just thinking about that video, my philosophy, and it was just interesting. And I wanted to kind of bring it up to you because it's such a great opportunity to ask a new investigator during that time what they've done, because you can really find out how dedicated they have and prepared they have become to for the role, and it's kind of indicative a little bit of how they would be in the study.
Yeah.
I just like to remind people of the importance of keeping open mind, open eyes when you hear new.
Well, yeah, and there's also things now. So I wrote that down as you were discussing. So I'm gonna redo that video because I think it's even more important now than it was back then. There's a lot of companies now, sponsor companies, actually my own company where we consult for, we actually work with a lot of new research naive physicians on setting up their sites. Um, there's relationships we've created through sponsors, and these are lab specialty sponsors, sample collection studies, where there's still an informed consent. So there's still a patient, there's still some kind of condition they're looking for, whether it's RSV, influenza, COVID, um, type 2 diabetes. I mean, there's all kinds. So you can not only get research experience, you get therapeutic experience. And you could start out by doing like one of these sample studies. And we've got these relationships lined up for people through DSCS sweat equity investments, which is why we're growing like crazy with these new investigators. So now you put on your resume, yeah, I do have research experience. You're only research naive once as a PI. But even that term,
Very
research
true.
naive, like you and I, we've never been PIs, right? So in the eyes of a sponsor, we're research naive. Well, we can never be PIs. Well, we're obviously not doctors as well. But when it comes to a clinician, they're considered research naive because they haven't done a study as a PI. But what if they've done a study as a sub-I? Well, then they're no longer research naive, but then they're PI research naive, which they do ask those questions too. But now if you do one of these simpler kind of studies, well, now none of those are true anymore, and you're an experienced PI. So there's been some changes. It's almost 10 years now, and I think it's a little easier for those research naive physicians to get in the industry.
It's an interesting topic. I'm actually started writing an article about it, as yet unpublished, but because it's been you know, don't get a red flag when you see new. Do
Mm,
the due diligence, uncover. It's like unpeeling an onion, right?
yeah.
To figure out what's been done. Yeah, so I liked your video,
Yeah, thank
and
you for that. I wrote it down so I could redo that video.
it looked like it was outside one of your sites.
Yeah, this will be done professional. Now we got a videographer for the pillar pieces of content. So I'll redo that and probably reach more clinicians this way, which is good for diversity, for all the things the industry wants to do, bringing access to patients. Well, this is what this is at the heart of DCT, is bringing access to patients. Well, what about instead of all this technology, which a lot of it's good, but a lot of it's still a very beta mode, why not just have more clinics across the country and not like CVS or Walgreens, but like actual clinicians doing real studies in their clinics? Because we saw what happened with CVS, and I predict now July 3rd, 2023, Walgreens will not be too far behind from not doing research anymore. You guys will see.
Well, I'm glad we have the experts like you. You know, like I said, there are definite benefits to DCTs. I can't speak on any more than that, but there's also such an importance of sites, and there needs to be a good balance, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. And our sites are our greatest resource. And every time I visit a site, I'm appreciative of what they do and how I'm treated and what I've learned. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a theme in my writing and speaking is just, you know, whenever you meet somebody, whenever you encounter somebody, that positivity, professionalism, remember they have a skill set they bring that could be greater than yours, even though it's different, and have that respect because we all need each other. And I know that sounds
Yeah.
sappy, but I truly believe that. And I try to, that's my narrative, boring or not.
And oftentimes, like the outsiders, I mean, maybe my hesitation in a lot of these newer strategies is because I've been in the industry too long, and I've grown somewhat jaded by how I can see these things actually working in the industry. So sometimes it's good to have fresh perspective. Well, why don't you do it this way? My new CRC, she's been with me a year now, but when she was brand new, because we use Creo, so we use eSource, and then we also have a EDC for every study, like you know. And she said, why are we putting this information twice? Like, I said, you know what? That's a very good question, because with paper, I understood why you put it twice. The paper, and then there's got to be a database that it goes to. But with eSource, well, why can't it just be ported somewhere? And the people at Creo are trying to work on this, but she's an outsider that asked a question, and we were holding on to sacred cow still. So yeah, I agree with you.
That is so funny. I think that one of the things, and I'm not giving false praise, but one of the things I enjoy about you is like you did a post at Christmas about the importance of encouraging people. I don't know if you remember this post that you did. You did a post about encouraging people and don't have your don't have, I mean, some people seem like the controversies all they, and I'm not judging. People can post whatever they want. That's the beauty of living in
Yeah.
America. But some people, you had mentioned, you know, make your post beneficial to help educate, to help show about new opportunities. And I really like that because that's what I try to do. And
Hmm.
that's just made me think a lot about, you know, when you have the opportunity to impact and people read your posts and you or whatever influencer and people impact, you have an impact and you reach people. I just, you know, I love your message and I always try to be very careful about the message that I'm projecting. So I really
Yeah.
liked that post and I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't remember it, but I
Maybe
mean,
I
it's
remember too much about your post, Dan.
I'm thinking
It's
about the
real
next
life.
one. I'm all like I'm thinking about the new one you told me to do, or you inspired me to do now. So that's what I'm thinking about, like the next step. But you're right, and a lot of negativity, like memes. A lot of people don't like my memes. A lot of people don't like Dr. Fox, Brad's memes. A lot of people have taken this page out of the playbook and kind of go on rants on LinkedIn, and I try to always balance that with something because I think that's important also to get the emotional, like the visceral emotion you have from this pain point. The algorithm favors that. Like when I post something positive versus like a meme that's just poking fun at something that we all know is annoying about this industry, that one does way better. The positive one doesn't do as well. But it's important to balance the two. And there's some people who just live for what the algorithm does and just, they keep going negative. Let's go more negative, more negative. And I always try to keep that in mind because at the end of the day, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to get more people aware about research and I'm trying to get more clinicians especially aware about the opportunities they can have for their patients and themselves, and then from the career side also. But equally important to keep the sites, like the voice of the sites, in mind. A lot of sites are frustrated and they don't have the platform to share, and they're happy myself, Brad, and Dr. Fox are doing this stuff.
I think your memes are hysterical.
Some of them.
I always enjoy your memes. I think they're great. So I
There's a
think the
lot I
balance
don't
is
post.
important.
There's a lot I don't post. You should see
Oh,
my
that's
phone.
funny.
If there's a bunch on my phone I have not posted that I don't think will ever make it, but who knows? Maybe
I
they will.
understand that, Dan. I totally do.
So the book, everybody go get the book. Go connect. Link Elizabeth's LinkedIn is underneath this video or in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast. This is a career worth following. She spent 2 decades at the site and CRO level, mostly the CRO level. Now she's going on her own as a consultant, as an influencer, as a really a generalist and an expert. And so it's going to be kind of cool to follow your career, this next phase of your career, and everyone can do it because we all live in public now on LinkedIn, and your posts are really good. You've got informative posts like this DOA log one. You've got stories. You've got you keep it interesting. I think you need a podcast. I really think you would do well. I like how this interview shifted towards the end to you interviewing me. You're a natural podcast host. I think you need to do it.
That's really nice. Thank you. I love finding out about people. You are so interesting, and I like finding out what you're doing. And so I didn't forgive if I didn't mean to
No,
put
no,
you on
I
the
love
spot.
it.
I
That's
love
good.
the back and forth. So thank you for that compliment. Brad said the same thing when I was on his show. He goes, I didn't know I was being interviewed. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. It's your fault because you're interesting.
I think the conversation is what we're going for, regardless of who's interviewing who. It's the
Right.
conversation, the ideas that come
I
out
agree.
from a two-way conversation. So
I
thank you,
agree.
thank
Well,
you for that, Elizabeth.
oh, Dan, thank you. It's always so nice. And I have a favor to ask. Can it not be 4 years the next time we talk?
It seemed like only one. I'm telling you, I hesitated to reach out because I was thinking in the back of my mind, why would we do it again? She's gonna think like it's too soon. I really thought that.
Oh, no.
I
I
thought
know. And
that.
you know, I'm teasing you. I enjoy speaking with you so much. Anytime you want to talk and I'm free, I mean, please
Let's
contact
do
me.
it. Let's do it.
And
Are you on
I
Twitter?
love it. And thank you. I'm not on Twitter. I'm on, well, I am on Twitter, but I'm not active. TikTok, yes.
Me
Um,
too.
Facebook, LinkedIn is my main one. I probably should branch out. Um,
I Twitter was my first besides YouTube. It was YouTube and then Twitter was used back in '09 to like promote the videos. And
right,
then Twitter became this like great place, and then it just kind of like LinkedIn took off, and I kind of
right.
ignored Twitter. But Twitter's doing so much innovating now in the Twitter spaces. I'm gonna try to find more researchers that are actually on Twitter or willing to get on Twitter, and we can just do like Twitter spaces and things like that. Because I think there's more dialogue that could be had in a different kind of format on Twitter than we have on LinkedIn.
No, I agree with you. And I also I'm going to be starting because I branched last thing, I'm not trying to digress. I branched out into doing videos and it's been
Ah,
interesting because I enjoy it. I'm getting better. I think my first one was pretty good. My second one, I was going like this a lot
let me find it.
because
Let me
my
find it.
content was right here. I think you find your place, but I think it's good to post the I think it's good to post the polished and the not so polished ones
Oh
because I'm
yeah, I
human
see.
and yeah, I'm human and you know, my first one I liked, my second one, the content was great, but my husband's like, "Why are you doing why are you got to get your stuff up so and I'm like, "Okay, sorry." And then the third one better. It's an evolution, but I think it's good to for other people to see what you try,
Yeah.
where you do well, where you need to do better. And I love authentic videos like other people who post and they're just raw and natural and I appreciate that. So not everything has to be perfect. So
No,
I'm gonna
definitely
start a
not.
YouTube channel. Yeah.
You need to. I was just gonna say, you need a YouTube channel, you need a podcast. These can go on TikTok, these can go on LinkedIn, these can go on Instagram, these can go on Twitter. I think Twitter is gonna come back, especially with this Twitter Spaces, where you can just get thousands of people in a room and just audio talk to each other. It's kind of cool. I'm thinking of how we can start doing that for research because LinkedIn doesn't have that feature.
That would be great. That would be interesting. Please think of me if you do that.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I'm gonna find you on there right now. But everybody go connect with Elizabeth. Her LinkedIn is in the show notes and the book too. The link will be there too. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Dan, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. It was great.
Like, subscribe, comment, share, guys. Bye bye.